Hmm. You can tell it's been a published week. I may wait a little bit too long to join the session. Busy setting up the stream. So while we're waiting for this to go along, since I drove two series primarily. I drove the F1, the McLaren MP430, and then I drove the IndyCar. I drive late models in real life, if you guys happen not to know, and so I'm an asphalt oval track guy at heart. But so I started that primarily whenever I first started the service, and then I slowly transitioned over to the roadside because I just was doing the roadside just for fun and giggles and stuff like that. And then eventually, what I ended up doing is falling in love with road racing, and then I really fell in love with the uh, the open wheel cars, the high downforce stuff. So that is one of the things that I absolutely love about it. So nope, that's not what I want to do. Ah, crap. I think I might just sent this to my actual television. Ha, that's funny. Um, interesting. Still getting used to all this stuff, and I happen to be live, and I'm trying to get the chat set up so I can see if anybody happens to be watching here in the next couple of seconds. So I'm going to hop out of iRacing, actually, and then I'm going to hop into Facebook. I'm going to post this on iRacing Drivers World. And so essentially, I'm simply going to wait for some chats. And then turn down the volume so I don't drive myself crazy with repeat. Okay, so we're going to go over to Facebook and open this browser up, and we're going to throw this over into the whatchamacallit. There's buffering. What in the world? I'm still getting used to this. So please bear with me here. There we go. We're up. So for some weird reason it wasn't doing that. It wasn't letting me get there. So all right, cool. To iRacing Drivers World. iRacing Drivers World. So let me put this up here. If I can type. Announcing. Hmm. Okay, I'll post it up. So hopefully we'll be getting some more people coming in, checking out live stream and setup stuff. We take care of some fiance. Some fiance text messages. All right. Back to all that. Okay, so get back to full screen and everything like that. And let's load up the sim and things like that. Essentially, and you will see small animals walking around from place to place. We have 5. 2 little ones and 3 rather large ones. That's our little train wreck, Copper. Huh, you're a little train wreck, ain't you? No? Go. He's actually my little sidekick. Anytime I'm in here, I have a little bed for him next to my rig, and he will go in there and he will sleep and curl up. So he's my little buddy. So essentially, we started out in the IndyCar yesterday, and I didn't stream that one, but just took what we had from a previous season, took around the track, and saw what we had. I use telemetry a lot, and you're going to see a lot of. I'm going to try and incorporate some of the stuff that I'm looking at in telemetry and how it translates to the handling and using telemetry to improve handling, dynamic balance, and essentially, in the end, improve your lap times and make your experience a lot more fun. Some of my friends in our league, Lionheart IndyCar series, which is an amazing league, by the way. They kind of make fun of me because I harp on like 2 or 3 things, because if these 2 or 3 things are not set properly, then you may as well not do anything else with the car. So the first things first. Number 1, especially on a road course with such dynamic, like super high changing elevation changes, like Sonoma, you have a lot. And especially up through like turns 3 and 4 and things like that, where the apexes are max loading on the car as you're coming around and you're coming up to the next one. So the number one thing that you need to make sure that the car is not doing, and this goes for any open wheel car, and for NASCAR, the splitter. And there's some other things on NASCAR like rear trailing arm mounts. You got to make sure that those aren't scraping because they're actually modeled. You have to make sure that the rear, the chassis mount on the track bar mounts on the right rear tire. You got to make sure that isn't scraping either. So essentially, you have to make sure that the car isn't bottoming out, because if you're bottoming the car out, the load on the tires are drastically reduced. So you can, if you're having some massive understeer, or in oval track terms, a push, if you're bottoming the car out, there is nothing you can do to the setup that will fix that. Nothing. You have to get the car up off of the ground. So one of the major things that we do in using telemetry is you can look at the ride heights and you can see exactly how low you're getting and if you're scraping. And one of the ways that you can do that with the Indy cars, and actually all the oval cars, anything with the skid plate underneath, or there's a, like an Indy car, for example, you have the tub. Sometimes the ride height that you see in Motec is actually higher than the bottom of the tub. So you may see the ride heights perfectly fine, except you're scraping. And that's because where they measure the ride heights from is not exactly on the bottom of the chassis. So you have to do a little bit of maths, is what we call it in Motec. You make a little formula and everything like that, and you can create your own channel. I will go over that and teach you guys how to do that. So that's the number one thing. If the car is bottoming out, you're never going to get the car to change. Number two, any car with a rear differential, a rear locking differential, has to be set up right, correctly. If the rear wheels are not turning how they're supposed to be turning, if they're not locking when they're supposed to be, when they're not unlocking when they're supposed to be, you have to understand all the power of the car, all the power that's being transmitted from the engine through the drivetrain, all the way out to those individual tires, is going to be overwhelming to any suspension change that you can make. So you got to make sure you're not scraping the bottom of the tub or scraping the splitter or any brackets or anything like that, any mounting points on the NASCAR stuff. So you have to make sure that's done, and you have to make sure that the differential is working properly. And I will show you exactly how you measure that. And I actually found this in a Project Cars forum, all the Motec stuff for that. They gave me really good direction on how to go and how to get that fixed. So I will also show that to you. So, and then you have tire temperatures or pressures. If your tire pressures aren't right, you're essentially, that's where you get like the ice skating rink feel. So you have to make sure that your tire pressures are correct, because tire pressures will affect your tire temperatures, and it's kind of like a circle. So the lower the air pressure you have, the softer the tire, the more it's going to slide, the more the contact patch is in contact with the ground, the hotter the tire is going to get. And the hotter the tire gets, the more it's going to slide around. And it's not going to build up as much pressure as you think it would, because even after it peaks out the pressure that it builds, it's still not enough to dissipate the heat. So it's just a vicious cycle. So when you get the ice skating effect and different things like that. So those are the first couple things that need to be done with your setup. Is your tire pressures, and believe it or not, this was actually our Lionheart setup from last night. We had an amazing race. We started like P18, we finished P8, so had a really good night. So let's look at my setups and things like that. And Sonoma, Season 4, 2018, Season 4. So you can see the setup that we were using last night was about, we're on a 16 PSI, and I've upped from last year up to 19 from last season. And believe it or not, these are maybe a little too low. I like to start getting optimal tire pressure ranges, hot tire pressure ranges for any car is a long freaking process. There's a window that'll give you the optimum, and you play inside of that window. So for each track likes a little something different. High speed corners like more air pressure. Number one, it dissipates heat a little bit better. Number two, it keeps the integrity of the sidewall. You're not getting as much sidewall flex, so the car isn't feeling like the Cadillac feel. You know, big, heavy 1980s car, you go around the corner, it's like you're swishing back and forth. So that window is one of the things you have to establish for a car, and it takes a long time. But it's one of those things where you work really hard up front, and it pays dividends later on the backside, because you're actually going to get, you're going to be able to start out on one end of the spectrum and work your way up until you hit the rollout or hot pressure that you get for a stint that's going to give you the best time over the stint. So that's the one other major thing about tire pressures is you don't want to have massive short run speed and then have the tire overinflate, because usually on a short run you start the pressures up higher. You can do that in NASCAR, they do that all the time. And then what will happen is, if that's fine for 10 laps, but if you go 20, 30, 40 lap run, the tires are going to overinflate and you're going to be like on balloons. So you don't want to do that either. So you have to make sure of the optimal tire pressure that gives you the best time over a fuel run. So, okay, there's a lot of stuff I don't want to ramble on. I actually want to get to driving because I only have like an hour and a half. So one of the other big things is you can see the ride heights. These were under an inch high yesterday, and I was scraping, massively scraping. And as soon as you get them off the ground, the grip comes back in the car. The car starts feeling a lot more responsive. You can be a little more aggressive going through the corners, and your lap time increases. So that's one other way that you can tell, just through trial and error, whether or not you're actually on scraping the bottom of the chassis or not. And so you really don't need Motec, but it sure does help. So some other things that we did was dealing with the rolls, the chassis roll of the car. On a road course, especially in the open wheels where you can actually just see the wheels up in front of you on the screen, and when you go through these hairpin turns, if the car rolls over too much, you're actually going to run out of suspension travel on the tire that's on the inside of the corner, and it'll actually lift that tire up. So if you're having too much roll in the car, you're going to lift up that tire, the inside tire. So if you look on the bar damage, we're already using the large bar. The material of the blades was steel, which titanium is softer than steel. Bar blade position, here's an important thing with cars that are capable of changing the sway bar in-car adjustments. You hear crew chiefs and engineers talk about building adjustability into a car, and this is one of the ways that I do it. The adjustable ARBs on the IndyCar that you can change from inside the car, I like to start the bar blade position right in the middle. That way, over the course of race, if I need to go one direction, I can. If I need to go the other direction, I can. If you set a car up in the garage with a one bar blade position, so where it is going to give you the most kind of oversteer. Well, if you're already oversteering the car on entry and you're already down, you're out of adjustment. You can't do anything. You got what you got, and it's the same thing if you go all the way up to a 6. If it's pushing and it's not as crisp and responsive as you need the car to be, you're out of luck, because if it's already have understeer, or if it has oversteer, I'm sorry, if it has oversteer and you have the bar blade all the way up to the top at 6, you can't dial anything out. You can't dial in that oversteer by increasing the stiffness of the ARB. I think I misspoke before. So say if you have oversteer and you want to adjust in the car with the bar, with the ARB, you have it set at 1 in the garage, you can't go any lower. So long story short, the moral of the story, I start both bar blades out, front and rear, at 3s. That way I have adjustability in the car. I can go either way. On road courses, you want the ARB preload to be 0 on both ends because you're making left and right hand turns. So some of the other things that you do, one of the first things right off the gate is you actually start with first gear. Set first gear first. And then at the end of the longest straightaway, you need to have almost topped out your RPMs, because you're going to need push to pass, a little more room for extra RPMs for push to pass, so and then a draft and things like that. So you don't set 6th gear when you're doing solo runs to tap out on the RPMs. You want a little more wiggle room, so you have a little more room. You have a little more RPMs to play with when you're behind somebody, when you're using push to pass. So at any rate, so let's get started. It's going to take me a couple laps to get up to speed and things like that. I forget what I was running yesterday. I think I was in the 15s, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure. So as you can see, I got telemetry running down here, and this can be recording to Motec, and then we're going to take a look at some of the stuff after that. I think we're the only one on the track. I have a love-hate relationship with Sonoma. I love the technical aspect of it, but I do not like how unforgiving it is. And as you're going through the gears, when you're making gear changes and things like that, you set your first gear and you set your 6th gear, and then you space out the ones in the middle. I try and do them evenly. I use a calculator, and I cannot drive and talk at the same time, so if I screw up, that's why. You don't want to be locked into what you calculate on a calculator with your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th. So use the other configuration. You don't want to be locked into what you do on the calculator, because you may have a corner that perhaps leads up to a fast roll section of the track, and if you need your 3rd gear to be shorter or longer or something like that, you can adjust that gear for that corner. So just as a general ballpark, I set the 1st gear, I set the 3rd gear, or 6th gear, and then I just subtract the 6th gear top speed from the 1st gear top speed, and then divide by 5, and then that's what I set 2nd through 5th as, and that'll give you a ballpark. So how I set 1st gear on road courses is the slowest corner, say like here, like this is a very important corner. I set it so I get as good of a launch as I possibly can, and I'm looking at chat to see if anyone's asking questions. I was damn near kill myself, and like I said, I can't talk and drive at the same time, but to get the best launch out of that slow corner, so that's your 1st gear. On ovals, I set it to get the best launch from pace car speed. So I'll actually, in a test session, usually in a private test session, I'll go out on the track and run pace speed on cold tires and set the 1st gear so that I get the best launch that I possibly can right on the start or on restart or on restarts. So that's how I set 1st gear. And then, like I said, on road course, I set 1st gear using the slowest corner to get the best exit out of that corner. And then to rehash, after all the math is done, getting your ballpark 2nd through 5th gears, you look at individual corners that may need a little help, may need a little different gear. You know, you may have a corner that the third gear that you initially set up may be a little too tall, and it bogs coming out of that gear or coming out of that corner. So you can shorten that gear up a little bit. This is actually my least favorite configuration of Sonoma. So you can shorten that gear up to give you a better launch out of that corner, and you're going to actually gain a lot of time just because of that. So that's one of the big things about gearing. And you know, that's quick. That isn't a very difficult thing to do. It's actually takes about as much time to do it as I took explaining it. So you can tell when I start concentrating. It's funny. So when I get done with this, I'm going to go back into Motec and I'm going to look and see, number one, that I raise the ride heights enough so that I'm not scraping. And number two, I'm going to look at the tire temperatures and the tire pressures and see how those look. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the front springs. And there's a reason for that. As you can see, most of the hairpins here are tight right-handers. And you can see the inside tire skip. You can see it lock up. I don't know if you can see it on your screen because I think I only have like my center screen showing, but that's another good thing for Motec. If you're running single screen and you're running correct FOV, you may not be able to see your tires, but in Motec you can see when that tire locks up, and I will show you that as soon as I throw down a lap here that I'm not embarrassed by. Because here's the thing, whenever you have one tire that's being lifted off the ground, every tire is important. Holy Jesus. Dirt tracking. All right. Hit a little landmine there. You want the max grip out of all four tires. You need all four tires working. And if one's being lifted off the ground, that inside tire is not pulling you around. It just isn't. So you're actually losing time with the tire being pulled up off the ground. So that's still happening. It's probably, if I had to guess, it's about half as bad as it was yesterday. And believe it or not, it wasn't that massive of a change. I think I went from 1750 springs to 1800 springs. And that dialed it out quite a bit. All right, I'm putting in some quiet laps here just so I can. That instability you see there coming in the corner, that's either a brake bias issue, or that could very well be a bottoming out issue. That's you hit the brakes just to plant the nose of the car, just to set the car, and it's just enough for the skid plate underneath the bottom of the tub to catch. And upset the car. So we're optimal of 116.8, which is abysmal. There you go. Finally, I hit it right. One of the things that I don't like about this configuration of this particular track is that there's not a lot of markers. There's not a lot of braking markers. There's not a lot of marks you can pick out to hit. Like, there's nothing here.
On the left side. Stay on your toes.
There's really no braking markers that you can hit to really set your corner up. It's a lot of timing and stuff like that. And I'm a visual kind of a person. Like, I need to see braking markers. I need to see stuff around the track to hit. I'm not very good at rhythm driving per se. That carousel does not like that inside line. Got these guys that brake a year early for the corner. It's just like, come on. And I lifted way early. It's just so I knew he was going to do that. But, well, that pretty much just screwed the tire temps and everything like that. But that's just what you got to deal with.
Keep your eyes open. Keep going.
Oh, for God's sakes. There, maybe I can get a couple more clean laps in. Then we're going to go check stuff out. Or maybe I'm going to miss the turn completely because I'm too busy worrying about that guy. All right, so let's go check some of this stuff out. Ew. Well, first things first. Let's cut out the background noise. Okay. So what you can see here, most of the turns are to the right-hand corners. So you look at the left side tires a little more closely than you do the right side tires. And believe it or not, you see this 215, 210, 192, and the inside of the tire is just massively worn as compared to some of these. You know, 4% here, 3% here, 4% here, and that's 9. Okay. What that is that is the actual result of the front of the car rolling too much and lifting the inside front tire up off the ground. So all it's doing is scraping, locking up, scraping, and locking up. So that's why that's the hottest tire on the car, and that's why you have this massively difference in tire wear. Okay, so that's the reason for that. So if you don't have Motec or if you don't have triple screens and you can't see which tire is doing what, like you can hear something scraping, you can hear the tire squealing if you have the tire volume turned up a lot. That's going to be a telltale sign that you're getting locked up a lot more, especially on the tire that's on the inside of a lot of the corners. So if we look at the left side tires a little more closely, you see 189, 179. So the front of the car is working. You get a little bit of understeer and things like that. So first things first, because we really haven't hit aero yet, and we're going to get to that actually pretty much almost last, believe it or not. While I'm sitting here looking at this, quick thing, your dampers. I'm going to show you a really cool way that the default Motec setup project that you get with Motec whenever you download it. It has a shock histogram. I'm going to teach you guys how to read a shock histogram and how to set it up properly and how to use it so you can set your dampers up properly. But when I start a setup, I start at what we call in the real world 50-50 shocks. Okay, so if you see the dampers here, it goes 0 to 23. You set them at 12. If you see down here at the bottom, more negative clicks produces less damping. Okay. What that means is the higher the negative number. So if you go minus 23, that is going to be the softest shock. It's going to do this. It's going to produce the least amount of damping. Damping is simply the resistance that a shock provides, whether it be compression, whether it be rebound or extending. Okay? So in this car, the softer the shock, the higher the negative number, and then the stiffer the shock, or the more damping, more resistance, would be 0. So that's how that works. So this would be, I mean, it would probably compress something along those lines like that. I don't know why I'm cringing my face. I guess it's just for effect. But tuning dampers by feel is hard. It's very hard to do. It's really easy if you have Motec, and I'm going to show you how to do that. One of the things that I did see, and I believe it was 3rd gear or 4th gear, it's a little too short between the two settings, and so I'm going to have to make a mental note and go back for that. But, all right, let's go back to the basic stuff. Let's make sure that the differential is working right. Let's make sure that we're not scraping anymore, and let's take care of this right front excessive roll issue that we have here. All right, so I'm going to do is I'm going to exit out of this, and I'm going to bring up Motec. If you've never seen telemetry before, it looks like spaghetti. It looks like an enormous pain in the butt, but it isn't. Once you start realizing, once you get comfortable with it, it's actually a lot better. So let's turn off iRacing, and let's bring up Motec. I'll put this on the center screen here. Okay. So I have, as you can see, all these different cars. I have different projects for all these different cars because a lot of the suspension geometry is all different. Okay, so this is what it looks like whenever you first come into Motec. So we're going to come up here and we're going to load the last telemetry run we had in the car. So here we are, 318. I'm driving for about 15 minutes, and unfortunately that is my time. This was yesterday, 15.955. So there's people who can drive super fast and talk, like Nicky Theme. He can freaking drive incredibly fast, and he can BS the entire time. I can't. So we're going to open this one up, and I'm going to show you what we got going on here as far as this is concerned. One of the major things you can see the ride heights down here? When you see this right here, and we are pretty much scraping in a couple different places, especially right here. And that just happens to be going through turn 1, which is a super high load turn. And I have it set up to show the front skid plate and the rear skid plate. And as you go through that high-speed corner, you're scraping. You can see minus 19 inches, minus 0.19 inches, and minus 0.08 inches, all down through there. And if you extend that out a little bit more, you can see under braking through here, that's a high compression turn right through there. That's that technical section at the top of the hill. So you have compression there, and you can see that. And then we're going to see a max braking. You can see the max braking over here. We're at 100% max braking. And you can see the nose. The blue line is the front of the skid plate. And you can see it dig in. Okay? These masts right here, these two channels, I made them myself through a lot of trial and error. But like I said, there's a lot of upfront work with setting up these projects that just yield massive amounts of return on your investment of time. So you can see right there, I'm going to be losing time going in that corner because the front of the car is scraping. And then again, right coming down into the chicane, you can see it bottoms out again. So right there, we see that the bottom of the car is scraping. Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, let's look at the tires. And you will. This is a lot of information. It takes a long time to build up. So if you come down here into this section, any of these dips, like I said, the inside, most of these corners are right-handers, and the inside tire is going to be the right front. And you can see right front skid, right rear skid. So what that is telling me is that there's too much roll in the chassis, which means the suspension is too soft, which means stiffer springs. Like I said, remember, chassis roll is primarily affected by the springs. The stiffer the springs, the less chassis roll you're going to get. But it's also ARBs too. But ARB is, in my opinion, a driver's tuning tool. How crisp a driver needs the entrance of a corner and the exit of a corner to feel. You tune that by using dampers and ARBs. But for now, we can look down here at these sections here, and we can see exactly where the tires lift. And this section here is coming up to on the top of a hill. That's where the apex is. So the car is really light, which just magnifies that whole lift the inside tire up more. And it does that all the way around. Again, that's another one off the top of a hill going to the apex. But if you come all the way down to the bottom here for these two sections, you see a massive, I mean, the right front speed is 0. It's 100% locked up. It's completely off the ground going into the chicane. And again, it is completely locked up going into the final hairpin before you hit the front straight. So that is a massive, massive issue that needs to be addressed. And so when people say, like, Motec is so hard to read, it is. If you just load this up and you just look at it without a lot of guidance, it's confusing. It's very confusing. So you got to get this basic stuff right. And this is one of the easiest ways to do that. What else? Okay. Let's look at the transmission real quick. And like I said, the differential is a major, major aspect of the car, especially in open wheels, where the differential it's light. When the car is light, there's not a lot of weight to it. Like an IndyCar only weighs about 1,400 pounds or something along those lines, 1,500 pounds. That goes up exponentially with downforce thanks to the wings. But where you need the diff to work best is where you have the least amount of downforce helping the car. So the diff needs to work best when the car is lightest, and that's in slow speed turns. So we can look coming through here, and we can see the differential not working properly. And that's these channels here. This is the stuff that I got from the Project Cars 2 thing that I saw that I would mention earlier. And this essentially, this diff percent down here shows the difference in speeds of the rear tires. If there's a big difference in speed, they're unlocked and they're spinning at different rates. The differential is not locking the axles together because they're independent axles. And I'll show you what a differential looks like whenever we get around to specifically talking about differentials. And we're going to show you what it looks like actually on the late model car. And I actually have a spare diff that's out of the car, and I'll show that to you. But so you can see right in here, the differential is completely unlocked. The difference in tire speeds are massive, and that's under max braking, so that's preload, and we'll get to that in a little bit. And then there's a little bit of entry differential stuff. But I don't want to get too far into the weeds because I can talk about what a differential does, how it does it, and why it does it for hours. But what you need to know is the entry differential is not working properly. The entry half or the entry side of the diff is not working properly, and that needs to be addressed. And believe it or not, when these, let me tell you how this manifests itself in the car. you're going your full mash on the gas, right? So your full mash, you can see your full mash right here, and you get off the gas, and then you start all the pressure in the diff that's locking it together in one direction stops because the car now wants to lurch forward, and now you're asking the differential for the gears to go from this to that. So that's essentially what the diff is doing. And the more preload that's on there, the closer those gears are together. See out here, there's so much more space for the teeth in the gears to change direction. So when you're driving and the diff is like that and it's driving the wheels forward, the gears are like this, each individual gear. Where you let off the gas and you mash the brakes and the car leans forward, the gear teeth go from one side of the gears to the other. Preload brings all that stuff together. It pushes the mechanism inside that changes the controls if they engage or disengage and keep the wheels locked together. It brings it a little tighter tolerances. So that's what preload is. So how that works actually in the car when you're driving. So you're going straight. You're coming up to a max braking zone. When you change that going from full acceleration to max braking and the gears and everything change, well, you went from both tires spinning at the same rate to now they're changing in different directions rapidly. Okay, it's like a shock. That'll unsettle the car. You'll actually get the car settled. You know, it'll start wiggling. It's gonna the nose is gonna start snapping back and forth, and it's pretty abrupt and it's pretty violent. So that's the entry stuff. So what we see so far is the car's still rolling too much. We can see that we're locking up the inside wheels, the slow speed corners. The differential is not working properly, and we're scraping the tub. All this stuff that we were looking at yesterday, it's still present. We improved it, but it's not there yet. We didn't take a big enough swing at it. So let's hop back into the sim. Let me get back over into this. So now we should be back into the sim. Okay. Let me get back into the full full view. I could just leave it in Windows mode, I guess, but all right. So as soon as this pops back up again, my screens are dark right now. Okay. First things first. Let's work on the ride height and the roll. Okay. So first of all, I like to take big swings at these things, or else you're going to be here forever. So let's go up a tenth. $647. So that's actually a lot. That's like a tenth and a half. $19. This is where OCD sucks. Okay, so that's basically a tenth. We'll just call it a day there. The front was worse than the back, so let's bump this up a little bit. Okay, so now we're lifting the tub up off the ground, just using ride heights. What we're also going to do is we're gonna raise it up even more by putting in stiffer springs. The springs are going to, well, in this car they're like this, but the more resistance, the less the car's weight is going to compress the springs, so it's actually going to hold it up higher. So let's do 200 pounds. Okay, here's the big thing. I haven't gotten into the dynamic weight transfer yet, but the car handles pretty good as it is. So what you don't want to do is change the front springs differently than the rear springs if the car feels balanced. Because right now the split between the front springs and the rear springs, they're dispersing the weight of the car evenly, relatively, between the front and rear tires. As a matter of fact, I do have a little bit of understeer, so we may deal with that first. But I don't want to go too far because they might be aero too. at any rate, the car's handling pretty good. So I'm gonna, if I increase the front springs by 200 pounds, I'm gonna increase the rear springs by 200 pounds. That way, you maintain the split from the front springs and the rear springs, and the dynamic balance should stay pretty much the same. Okay, so those are those two things. Let's go to drivetrain. Okay. So here we see clutch plates, preload, ramp angles. All right. The best way to explain this stuff is ramp angles actually, if you look at the teeth on the gear of the differential, there's two gears. There's a pinion gear that comes in from the drive shaft for the input from, say, the transmission, and then there's a ring gear that transfers the rotation this way to rotation this way. So those gears mesh together like that, and then they spin each other. Okay, the design of those gears, each tooth, say like you have a tooth that may look like that, the tooth, that's the ramp angle. So that's a lesser ramp angle, that's a steeper ramp angle, and things like that. So we'll get into that too whenever I show you what the differential looks like. Hopefully by that time I'll have it apart, and I'll actually have a ring gear I'll be able to show you. So that's ramp angles. This is actually degrees, so 45 degrees and 30 degrees. Okay, so when you look at the description in the bottom, the higher the number, it has less locking force, the lower number has more locking force. And the reason why that is because if your angle is pretty steep, okay, like say this is 180, 90, things like that. So the lower the number, it has more locking force just because when the teeth hit each other, they have less place to slide. Okay, essentially that, if I remember it correctly. But at any rate, so what we see here, there's a power side of the gears, and then there's a coast side. A coast is whenever you're on braking. The power side is pretty self-explanatory. It's whenever you're on the gas. So remember how I said the gears will do this? It'll be like that as you're driving the wheels forward. That's the power side. And then when you let off the gears and it switches back, you know, and the tires are now doing this, this is the coast side. So you have two different ramp angles. So what we see is that we need the tires, or I should say we need the diff to lock up more under braking. And so what we need, we're good under power, maybe a little too good under power, but we need a smaller number. So, believe it or not, I think maybe a 30 coast and 45 power should be good, because we were at 45-30 was way too much lockup for the power. We weren't seeing any spikes whatsoever, so they were locked together consistently. But you do want them to be able to a certain degree spin at different angles, because it does help you get through the corner a little bit better. It does help the car rotate. But the front side is so bad, and 15 degrees isn't a lot. So we'll go from 45-30 down to 30-45, and we'll see that. Number two, remember how I said the initial braking of the car, that's all preload. You want to control how far these teeth have to move. So the preload's a little light. Let's increase that a little bit. And here's a weird thing about this car. I do not know why. You have negative 100, positive 100. So we were at 60. So let's bump that up to 75. Okay. Clutch plates. All right. Inside the differential, there's clutches. Okay. Just like a clutch in a transmission. All you need to know about clutch plates is that the more the clutch plates, the more the force going through the diff is amplified. So, believe it or not, this is one of the few garage tips that are pretty accurate and complete whenever they give it a description. So they multiply the amount of locking the differential can create. So that's essentially that. You can go up to 12, 4. With these, I start low. I think, yeah, 4 is the least amount. I start low, and then I start working my way up. Anytime I make a change to a car, I start on one side of the spectrum, and I work my way in one direction, whether it be, 12 clutch plates and start working your way down, or the other way around. Because if you start in the middle, you have no idea what direction you really need to go in to get optimal. You know which way to go in just because the car may not feel right. But as far as what is optimal, it's hard to find if you just start in the middle. So 4. Let's just say, for example, that even at 30, which is the least amount, I'm still not satisfied with the diff under entry. Now I can bump up to 8 clutch plates and increase that force for 30. So I make 30 has this much power with 4 clutch plates. With 8 clutch plates, it has this much power. It's still 30 because that's the degree. You can't change the degree of the teeth on the gears, but you can change the clutch plates. So I hope that helps basically explain how this differential section works. So let's just try that. Okay, we're going to keep the dampers at 50-50, and we're not going to mess around with this quite yet. Probably after this next run, we'll see what we can do. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to shut up, and I'm just going to make some runs, and I'm going to try and put in some decent lap times. Cold tires. Third to fourth, that's the short gear. They're too close together. Fourth gear is awesome for the exit, so I'm going to change third. Hopefully there's enough play in there. My phone turned off, so hopefully no one's asking me questions. The most people I've seen watching is 4, but that's okay. It's a brand new stream. It's a brand new channel. Plenty of room to grow. If you lock up the tires under max braking, that could also be a symptom of scraping. Because as the car rocks forward, it actually starts resting on the tub, and it actually takes weight off of the front tires, which allows them to skid more easily. If you're wondering why I may sound like I'm straining, is because I do have an OSW 30 midge wheel, and the Indycar does not have power steering, and I have this set up to be representative of the forces that you actually feel in the car. So actually a little bit of a workout. All right, I need a 15-second lap here. This is not going to be it. Terrible. Just terrible. I can't hit that apex to save my life today. There you go. I got greedy. Too greedy. Shift, bastard. Out left field here. All right, so that's it for that session. But what we're going to do is we're going to go back and we're going to look. I mean, the optimal for this is a 15.8. Which isn't bad. You'll notice that the car is hopping pretty good. Damn. This thing don't mess around. Huh. I guess you have like 3 seconds to get out of the thing. So, all right, awesome. We can't see our tire temps. You'll notice that the car is hoppy. That has a lot to do with the third springs, and we'll get to those in a second, and the dampers. Both of those things are going to help control the my phone is dead. Is going to help control that bouncing. So, is this that bad? Good. That's going to help that bouncing. Okay. That's going to control that a lot. So, okay, let's pull up Motec again. All right, we're gonna do something like this. One of the other cool things with Motec is you can overlay. I mean, we got a half a second, increase over that. It's not as good. We're still about a half second off my optimal was yesterday, but I mean, this is me thinking about not concentrating. It's me thinking about talking to you gats and everything like that. Okay. Now, let's do over here where the tire's a little bit hot. 5 laps in, okay? As you can see, we don't have as massive lockups as we did before with the diff. And remember how we changed the power side to make it unlock a little bit more? We do have that here. So going through, was that turn 2? Coming down through, let's see, was that, 3, 3A, and 4. I think that's 4. And then coming out of that big chicane down there at the end. So that's not bad. And most of this stuff down here is really under massive braking and things like that. So we may be in that regime where we need to increase the clutch plates a little bit. So we may try that. We'll give that a shot next time. It's really no big deal. What we have to do here, just give me a second. Sorry about this. I have to change this parameter. I may have had this set up for copy and paste this from a different car. So let's change it up to 15,000 RPM. Okay. Here's something pretty cool. Something else you can do with Motec. Whenever you do this RPM versus speed graph, you can see what gear you're in at each speed, and then you can see the drop. Okay. Now here's something big with this drop. Let's do this so that we're right down in we should be down in the first gear, down in through here, and then, no, that is not what I want. I want these. Okay, so we can go back, yeah. So see down here, you can see the throttle trace and the brake trace. So we want that to see what we got going on at max throttle, and then we can bring this back. We don't want any brake input to show in here whatsoever. Okay, cool. So what you have here, I don't know what the hell that was. Yeah, first gear up to about 90. Well, you can click on it and you can see exactly how fast you're going. 93.2. These drops should be straight down. Okay, this is another more technical way of choosing your gearing. Okay, it should be straight down and then up again. See, this is more straight down, up, straight down, up, straight down, up. Okay, and then how far apart the peaks are. You can see that. Remember how I told you that between 3 and 4 seemed a little short? You know, you don't got a lot of, whatchamacall, out that way. But I was thinking, hey, I'll change 3, but then that'll bring me down into second gear a little too much. So I may have to shorten up second gear, and then I can mess around with third gear, because fourth gear, fifth gear, and sixth gear are pretty solid. It's just down here that seem to be a little foobarred. Now the other issue is when you get down in the second gears, the options that you have for second gear are limited. So we may be stuck with what we have, but we'll see. Okay, so let's get back to the important stuff. Let's look at if we are still scraping. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to do this. you can overlay the previous laps over top of the ones that you have. So you can see any changes. Stop. Do ladies. Okay. So this one you can see it's cleaned up coming through here a lot because the last session had a lot more. Okay. So that's one way to go and look at that. But let me keep that on and let me come look at the suspension and things. And it doesn't look like we made a whole heck of a lot of changes to it, but it kind of gets jumbled up. So here's through one, and we're not scraping as much as we were before. Through there, we are hitting that. Not bad. Let's see how we look. See, this dip under braking right here? That's under max braking, and we do skip just a little bit, but that isn't awful. We're good through the chicane. We're not hitting anywhere. And here's the next big braking zone. We're just skipping a little bit, and then we're scraping as we lift off the throttle. Actually, no, we're still full throttle there, so we're getting a lot of compression on the front. That may be third spring. And like I said, we'll get to that in a second. But tires. Let's look at tires. As you can see, we still have some dips. We still have some lockups. We have a lockup there. We have a major lockup there. Big lockup there and big lockup there. So we're still locking up that right front, but we're not locking up the rear as much as we did before. And let's see how it looks when you compare it with the previous one. Kind of same. We fixed that one. We created that one, but it just might be a product of the lap. Nope. But we also may have been hitting the curbing too, which would do that too. It looks like we saved some stuff right there. And it's not as bad right there. And it's not as bad right there. So we're making improvements with the stiffness of the suspension. Let's come back to this real quick. I'm going to show you what I mean. If you've never seen a shock histogram, this is what a shock histogram is. And let me get rid of that. Okay, so the big thing you have to start off with is this is a picture of how fast a shock is moving, either in compression or in rebound or extension. What you want, the low speed compression in this grayed out area, that is your handling changes. Going through turns, going through the S's, going through pretty much any corner that isn't doesn't have a lot of bumps in it. Okay? The high speed stuff is the bumps in the road, and say like if you're going to hit a curb, you know, you can tune the shock to do that too. Now, what this is measuring and how it gets this histogram is that it looks at the shock velocity, how fast it's going in and how fast it's going out, and it tells you how much time it's spent in that state. And then you read the depiction on how it is here. And long story short, it gives you a pretty good picture of what the shock is doing. And we'll do the right sides first because the left sides are kind of screwy just because it's a road course and most of the turns are to the left. But they're important too, don't get me wrong, but the right side tires or the left side tires are bearing the brunt of the handling load through most of the turns. The important ones, the ones that actually get you all the way around the track. So you can see here, 29.2% versus 27.5%. This is the rebound side, as you can see there. This is the bump side or compression side over here. You can see that we're spending more time in the rebound than we are the compression, which means that shock is unbalanced overall for the overall lap. This averages out everything over the entire lap. I like to use this full lap evaluation just to get some basic ballpark, just to get them tuned in a, I keep using the word ballpark way. And then what you can do is zoom in on an important handling section of the course. So right up here, the left front you see is more in rebound than it is in compression during handling transitions, turning left, turning right, and things like that. And the high percentages, the high speed stuff, is a little more on the rebound too. If you look at the bottom, if you look at the left rear, it's completely opposite. It's only spending 22.5% of the time in rebound, but it's spending 27.9%, almost 28% in compression. That's a highly unbalanced shock. The high-speed stuff isn't horrible, but the low-speed stuff is. What does this mean? Okay. If it's spending more time in compression, okay, as you're going over the bumps, it's actually lifting. Wait, how am I going to put this? It's not letting the tire come back up as much, okay? So it's not holding the tire down as the chassis is moving up. It's letting the tire come up off the ground. So essentially, you're losing adhesion to the ground. Rebound, you want it to hold that tire down and not just go back up again. So essentially, what this would do on the rear tires is this is telling me that I'm losing traction. I'm leaving traction on the table with the rear tires here. So the right side tires kind of paint basically a decent sized picture, but because of the nature of this track and stuff, you're going to get these dips in here in the middle. Typically, you want like a mountain kind of look at the histogram. But so let's look at the transition stuff. So let's come all the way around. Let's just do this section here. Turns 2, 3A, and 3B, or whatever the heck you want to call it. The car's shifting back and forth, throwing the weight from one side to another. The shocks are really working hard through here. We still see a lot more rebound than we do compression. We still see a lot more compression than you do rebound. And then the left side tires are kind of showing the exact same thing. So between these two things, you can make a pretty good evaluation on what the shock's doing. You can feel pretty confident in going in one direction as far as that goes. So let's load up one more section and see what we got going on. Or let's load up another session. Let's also see what Facebook is doing. See if anybody critiqued the live stream so far. Tinsy and Rupp, okay. I got about 75% chance these two cats are going to give me crap. Oh, God. Oh. Thanks, Scott. What the Nazi? What the hell are you talking about, Tinsy? You crazy. Cool. All right. So let's hit back to this driver briefing. Friends, who needs them, right? Get out of that. I am honestly surprised you have not seen a husky come in here and start licking my face. Because we have two of them and they're around here somewhere. But I only got probably maybe another half an hour of this before I have to get going. So As you can see, it takes me a long time to test and things like that. It takes me like 3 times as long as I have to explain everything, but I still think it's worth it. Because a lot of this stuff, I came in with zero knowledge of how to set up a car or vehicle dynamics or racing, and I did a lot of studying. I have a book back over there, Vehicle Dynamics, from 2 engineers, and the dogs ate it, so there's a big corner of it missing. But I have plenty of books that I've read, and I don't even know how many YouTube videos I've seen of engineers trying to explain vehicle dynamics, but it's still a good deal. So, where were we at? Okay. Under braking, we were scraping the tub, right? Okay. So, on open wheel cars, Indy cars, and definitely the F1 McLaren and the FW31, you have the individual side springs. Well, the FW31 is a little weird in the back. It doesn't actually have independent springs in the back. It's chassis rolls all done with the ARB, and compression's all done with the heave spring. But at any rate, third springs are also called heave springs, which differentiates it from normal suspension springs, which are attached to each individual wheel. The third spring is attached to the front and basically works with the, how can I put it, both the chassis, left and right side chassis in the front of the car and the rear of the car, and what we call heave. You're heaving forward, you're heaving backwards, and it keeps the car in a more constant attitude. So in an Indy car, it's a little different in the F1 cars, where you can actually say, I need X amount of spring. Like for this one, there's no third springs in here. So this could be one of the reasons that you really don't have, we have so much dip in the car. So let's just do none and stiff, and let's see what we have there. And something else I'm going to do is that I do know that we have some understeer in the car, so I'm going to do that. And I'm going to leave the ride height. I'm not going to reset the ride height. Or maybe I will. Yeah, I will. Just because it's best to keep things, don't want to change too many things at the same time. But I know the one thing that we changed for the third springs are going to give us different results, feel of the car, different results in Motec than changing the rear springs as much. The rear springs may affect it a little bit, but not bad. But like I said, it shouldn't be all that bad. So let's go to drivetrain. No. Change one thing at a time. I still get the urge to change a bunch of crap at the same time, and then you lose track of what does what, what's good, what's bad. So, all right, back to silent mode. New rear springs. Yay. A little bit oversteer. Let's try this one more time. See if I can't be a little more prepared for that. But that's a good example of what happens whenever you throw more weight to the rear of the car dynamically through the corners. Because that's a nice constant radius turn, nice long sweeping turn, and everything like that. And you can really see what effect it has on the car. So we'll take it easy. So what you saw there, you saw the whole front of the car start bouncing. That's what happens whenever you put a heave spring in it and it's not adjusted properly. There, got a little bit of heat in the tires, and it's stuck a lot better coming out of that carousel. I don't think I like that third spring. Because one of the big differences that an F1 car has that this car doesn't is a third spring in an F1 car actually has a damper attached to it, so it actually has a shock. So you can adjust how much it's going to move or how quickly it's going to move, and you can dial out that bounce. Whereas this, you have to do that by setting the distance. It's almost like in this car it's progressive spring. So if you don't start out with a lot of compression, it's softer, whereas if you really squeeze the spring, and I'll show you that in a second, it becomes more stiff. Shit the bed on that one. Could have been a 15-second lap. Ah. I have this concentrating thing where I bite my lip and my fiance says it looks retarded. So, sorry. I'm all self-conscious about it. All right, 52nd lap. There we go. So back to 15.5. Actually, I haven't even checked the races and see where the heck that even stacks up. That may be absolute crap, for all I know. But for now, it's about as good as we're going to get. So I like where we're at. Save, done. All right. I could feel the car going through turns 3A, or 3 and 3A. Keep calling 3 and 3B, but 3 and 3A. I can still feel it bottoming out and scraping. You can hear it. You can feel it. So let's see what we can do. Just as I thought. So second gear is as short as it is going to go. So let's fool around with third gear. Let's bump it up just a tick. Bump fourth gear up just a tick. See how that works. Okay. So, well, let's look at the tires. 207, 185, 94, 96. That's still a lot. And we haven't really got to the tires yet. 190, 175, that is a lot. If you happen to not know what camber is, the tires up and down would be 0 camber. If the top of the tires are angled away from the car, that's positive camber. If they're angled in, that's negative camber. Okay. So since when you're going through a corner and the weight transfers over and you have sidewall flex in the tire and all that kind of stuff, as the car goes through, they'll do that. So you'll get the max contact patch on the outside tire, and it'll help you go around the corner more. Well, that's all well and good. However, you have this thing called camber thrust. Camber thrust is essentially the term that they give to, you have a, say, a constant, like if you're at the centrifugal circuit and you're going around a corner and it's perfect like that, and the contact patch is perfect on the ground, you're going to be X fast. It's going to be able to handle X amount of load. Okay, let's, for number's sake, call it 1,000 pounds. Okay, you can angle that in just a little bit, and you can start putting a little more pressure on the inside of that contact patch, and you may be able to get 1,100 pounds or 1,050 pounds. And the tire is actually going to be able to handle a little more load, and it's going to make you go through the corner quicker. Think of it like this. Think of it, you're running down the street in the city, and you want to go around a corner. If you lay your right foot, you're going to make a left, you're going to turn left around a corner. You put your left foot down on the ground, and you kick off to go in that direction, you may slide it a little bit. You know, your foot may slide as you go around the corner. But if you put a little more pressure on the inside and like the inside ball of your foot, you get a little more of a cut. You get a little more ability to put more pressure on that foot and change directions a little more aggressively. So that's what camber thrust is. There's a decent amount of camber thrust, and then there's a massive amount of camber thrust. And I know, especially in the NASCAR world on iRacing, that they have this big camber I call it an exploit. I'm calling it what it is. They run massive amounts of camber because the tire won't explode, just because they haven't modeled that into the tire yet. So they're running on 60, maybe hell, even 30, 40% of the contact patch that they're using. It's fast, especially on an oval, because there's straightaway speeds and there's rolling drag. The less contact patch you can have on the ground, there's less drag there, which actually makes you go fast, especially in a straight line. In the real world, if I put 14 degrees of camber on my late model that's sitting in the garage, I would last 10 laps, then the tire would explode, and then I'd go off into the sunset and crash into the frickin' wall. But since that doesn't happen here, people use it. And, you know, I don't hold it against them. You can do it. Do it. I just don't like driving that kind of a car because it feels weird. So in a road course, in a road car, you kind of have the same little bit amount of that effect, but I like traditional setups because they're more comfortable and fun for me to drive. If you're an alien and you can handle 10 degrees of camber, knock yourself out. Dynamic camber, knock yourself out. I hold nothing. I have no ill will against anybody. I just would prefer that the tires would explode if you abuse them like you should, or like people do. But okay, so when you come over and you look at the tread, that's still a lot. So we had a pretty decent run. Let's go back and let's look at some Motekage and see what we got going on with that. Let me take off the iRacing and let me put in some Motec. Okay. So let's start off with the suspension. Let's load in the latest telemetry run. 59, 15.5. Although that other one may have been slightly more usage on the track, and we may have had a green track because this session just went up. Okay. We're still scraping the front. Come through the turn one. We're still scraping it going up through there. Still bottoming out through there. That's even with the third spring, okay? Even under braking and stuff like that, we're still bottoming. We're still scraping that front nose plate. Even if you look at the ride heights up here, and especially these two channels I made myself. I took the left front, right front, divided them by 2. You add them together, you divide them by 2, you get the average. And essentially what that does is across the ride height points, say if one's like that and one's like that, and you add them up and you take the difference, you get the center point. So you kind of know where the middle is, and that's what I use to calculate the skid plate ballpark. It isn't hyper accurate, but it's going to give you a ballpark, especially whenever you're just accelerating, decelerating straight ahead and there's not a lot of roll. It'll give you the center point of the skid plate. And I'm not all that great in trigonometry or whatever the hell else I need to use to figure out the sides of the skid plate. We're close enough for government work. So we added the third spring in there, and we've still got a lot of bounce to the nose of the car that I didn't like, even though it was kind of fast. And I don't want to make it too stiff because this is a very bumpy track, and you can actually make it worse. So I may give it a shot, see what happens, and then make my adjustment from there. Because if I can't dial it out, because right now it's set pretty soft, if I can't dial it out, making it stiffer, then I'm just going to lose the front end. The rear I like. The rear wasn't too bad. It didn't hop the ass end of the car that much. But I'm going to go to another thing here, dynamic loading. And essentially what this is, and this is a lot of research, and all you're going to see is the end result of this. I'm not going to share with you the math and all the research that went into this, because when I say it's months, I mean it's months figuring out how to calculate how much weight is on each wheel. All all the information is out there on the internets. You can figure it out with a little bit of effort. But I do it like that because it's a lot more accurate than just reading tire temperatures. Because you can actually differentiate whether or not you can see if aero is playing a factor a little better. So right now I need to know what the spring rates are. All right. Crap. What was it? 2100 and 1450. Okay. 1450. 1450. Okay. So now that's in there. We can close that out, and it will recalculate the dynamic loading. Okay. So we can take a look at the first big dynamic loading right through here. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at this and see the average. And that's on the right side because it's a left-hand turn. 1752, 2114. So a little bit more on the right rear. These corners don't really count that much because there's so much elevation change, compression on the suspension. But this one isn't bad. Let's see where this is. The carousel is going to be the big one. 2014, 1752. Let's look through the carousel. Let's back that up a little bit. Okay. 1752, 24. No, sorry. I'm looking over here. 1393, 1369. Sorry, disregard all that crap that I said before about the 2000s and stuff. Okay, this is the important bit right here. You see going through this corner, the average dynamic loading on both the right side tires, 1393, 1369. In the grand scheme of things, that's equal. Same thing again here. 753, 715, 349, 384. That's really close. That's actually very, very happy. Look at this hairpin. So yeah, that's left side tires. 795, 753. We're good. The rest of it's going to be good too. If those slow speed, high speed, medium speed corners are indicative of the overall dynamic balance of the car, it's fine. But here's something. You look down here and you see the front to rear weight balance of the car. It's at 56.2%. Okay? Come back through the carousel. We are most of the time around, well, I forgot to put this down here. There, average, 46.6. Okay? This is where aero comes in. Okay, people say I'm crazy, but I'm not. I've done research on this, and this is where aero comes in. This is why this is important. This corner, 49.5. Just depending on where you are in this corner, 47.9, so 48. This right here, this slow speed corner, I don't really count it, okay, because there's not a lot of downforce on the car as it is. So let's just say 49%. Let's come back to here. Well, let's do one thing. I'm sorry. Let's do one thing. Let's come back through the carousel. All right. This is how you figure out what we call the center of pressure, or the aerodynamic center of the car. Okay, let's look at the average front and average rear right heights. Through this corner, 0.719. Let's go to aero. We get as close as 0.719 as we can. That doesn't happen all that often. And the 1.57 on the ass end. close enough for government work. Okay. And it's really not that big of a deal. All right. Front downforce percent. The amount of downforce being acted, the amount of downforce being exerted on the front axle is 44.75%. That's aerodynamic downforce. The air foils generating downforce as pushes down on the car. If this was the car, the nose of the car, the ass end of the car, the downforce is pushing down on the car. Okay. So 44.75%. And here, it's 47.9. All right, so what you have is the center of gravity of the car, essentially. This isn't, I'm not a massive engineer here, but this is going to be ballpark enough. Yeah, 49 and 44, which means that the center of gravity of the car is further forward than the aerodynamic center of the car, okay? You never, ever, ever, ever want the aerodynamic center in front of the center of gravity, okay? It makes vehicles inherently unstable. I actually watched a video of a guy who made his own little wind tunnel and put a toy car on there and put the center of gravity behind the aerodynamic center of the car, and this is just a toy car, and it flipped around backwards, okay? The aerodynamic center of the car either has to be co-joined with the center of gravity, the actual weight of the car, or just slightly behind it, okay? Now, the further back the aerodynamic center is, the more understeer you're going to get, the more aerodynamic understeer you're going to get, because these 2 points, the car's trying to rotate around these 2 points. So like if you were trying to spin something, it's easier to spin it if both of the what the hell you want to call it, the fulcrum is at the same point than trying to spin, you know, say like if you had a board and you had 2 focal points, you're trying to spin it like this, it's going to be hard to spin because you're working against 2 fulcrum points. But if you put it like that, you see what I'm saying? All right. So 44.75. I do not want to compromise rear grip, okay? So I'm going to do front grip. We'll add another thing on here. Where were we? 47.9. No, I don't want to go crazy quite yet. We'll do 47. We'll see how this works. It's going to be oversteery. I know it's going to be oversteery. Now, this is where the cycle comes in of setup, the setup cycle. Because we're going to change one thing. We may have to go back and change springs. We may change the dynamic balance of the car because this car does produce copious amounts of freaking downforce. So let's go back in. I'm almost done because I get to do this while the wife's away. Or fiance, I mean. And she feels like a wife. She's a great wife. Fiance. Almost wife. But, so we'll see how this feels, and then we'll call her a day. I think we've gone, you sons of... son of the beach. Alright. Take that. Rear tires. Show you who's boss. Like I said, a little oversteery. Ah! I think that was more me than anything else. But I will tell you one thing while we're on our outlap. There are things on a race car that are meant to work together. And if you have things working against each other, you have to overcompensate other places. So instead of getting 100% out of each individual component working in harmony with each other, you're only getting 70% out of one thing, and then you're getting 60% out of the other. Or maybe you might get 90% out of one other component, and things like that. But when you start getting stuff thrown together with trial and error, clicking, and things like that, you may be able to drive it. I'm not saying that you can't. But it makes for a much more enjoyable driving experience if everything is working together and the car isn't trying to kill you. You just have to relearn how to drive the car. And I'm going to tell you what, we can already get through that hairpin massive amounts better than we did before. And something else that's good with Aero is you don't have to have as much steering input into the car if you have the Aero working right. So you start dialing out the push loose, the dreaded snap oversteer. Like I said, it's a lot of oversteer now. Holy Jesus! I made the back end mad. I made the rear tires mad. See, a lot of that oversteer and the spinning out is me, muscle memory, remembering how much wheel to put into it at first. Oh, for flying. Fuck's sake. And it not working right. You know what that also may be? We put more front downforce on the car, and I already didn't like the bounciness of that third spring, and that may be what you're seeing. Or, at a more front downforce, we may actually be bottoming the car out more. So like I said, this is a cycle. Anytime you set up a car, it's a cycle. Mother of God! We're gonna try something here. No more third spring for you. Okay. Last run, then I gotta go. Now, some of you may be thinking, he just screwed himself all up because of the Aero stuff. And, I do this in the F1 car. I set the F1 car up like this. I set this car up like this. And, once you massage out the handling woes, you definitely want these two numbers to be close. Now, granted, this is a brand new car, and I'm going to have to get used to the aero changes that it likes, and that difference in where the center of pressure is acting on the car versus the center of gravity, and it may like more. May like more of a spread between those two, and that's cool. But you gotta just find it out, and that's through a lot of trial and error. Good God. And those are all the kids. But at any rate, I'm going to keep going with this. You guys have a good night.